Coaches, are you ready to revolutionize your game preparation? For the past 5 seasons, coaches across the nation have been using the ultimate scout team game changer, the Coachpad. Imagine this: no more scrambling on weekends to prep scout cards, no more fumbling with paper and binders. Whether you're drawing your cards digitally with a computer program or sketching them by hand, the Coachpad is your all in one solution. Picture yourself on the practice field effortlessly managing your scout team or standing on the sidelines during game day, syncing adjustments from the press box to your coaches on the sideline and back. With the coach pad, you can clearly see your scout cards even in the brightest sunlight. No more squinting or dealing with the wind blowing clear vinyl sleeves everywhere. This offseason, take your coaching to the next level. Get your coach pad today at thecoachpad.com and gear up for a winning season ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that lovely jazz, depending on what avenue you're looking at this. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. Today we have Hall of Fame NFL head coach, longtime coach, both at the college and NFL levels, Coach Dick Vermeil. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right for an old man. I'm hanging in there. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, as I kind of said in our pre-part. I'm not going to ask you like I normally do for people's background. I think most people who are coaches kind of know who you are. Obviously, with your time with the Eagles, Rams, Chiefs, and the UCLA back in the day, and your time broadcasting, obviously. But I like one of the first things I want to ask you is about because again, as I prepared for this and doing that, you obviously have a history of pretty much everywhere you went of turning places around. And why do you think that is? Because all the way back to like UCLA, you had tremendous success in what you did there and beating USC and beating Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and then going to the Eagles and making the Super Bowl, then going to the Rams and obviously 1-1 and building that up from where they were, and then kind of reshaping the Chiefs after another brief retirement. Why do you think throughout your career you've had so much success in turning places that were struggling into be competitive, consistent winners?
Well, I think it all started with the people I surrounded myself with to help me in my coaching staff. Now, at UCLA, I had 10 assistants. When I came to the Eagles, I had 10 assistants. In 1976, that was three more assistants than anybody else in the NFL had. Now they got 25 assistants. But I always surrounded myself with people that were experts in their area. And then I tried to present them with a team in the frame of mind to be coached. And I handled, at first I coached my own offense, coached my own quarterbacks, and called my own plays and had charge of the personnel at the Eagles and all that. But after going into broadcasting for 14 years, when I came back, I couldn't do it that way. So I put people in coordinator positions, and then I monitored them and built them to think like I think in terms of the philosophy of teaching and coaching and demanding and working, and built it around there. Then sold the concept that none of us are going to outsmart the great coaches in the NFL, but we're all young enough to outwork them. And so we came up with a theme that hard work is not a form of punishment, it's a solution. And there's absolutely no correlation between working less and getting better. Okay. So that's what we did. In all three programs, NFL programs, the first two NFL programs that both were the losingest teams in football. When we took the Eagles, they didn't have a first, second, or third round pick for 3 years. And they'd been losing. In the third year we got there. Why? Because we worked. And the players gradually buy in. Those that can't buy in leave. In those days, you didn't have free agency. And as I just said, we didn't have draft choices. So we spent a lot of time individual coaching players, making them better football players. And it paid off. We went to playoffs our third year. The Eagles, we went to Super Bowl and lost in our fifth year. Went to playoffs the next year. And the next year, I left coaching for 14 years. At the Rams, we had first round picks. We had free agency. And they had some talent there. And they just hadn't gotten it going. They had a losing record all through the 90s. And we took the same approach. We took like a college spring practice session and put it into pro football double days. So every assistant coach was given enough time to coach his players individually, then collectively to help them get better, because we weren't just going to manufacture first round picks. But what we were able to do with the Rams is draft number one. I drafted Orlando Pace, number one pick in the draft that year. I moved up to get him because I really loved the guy. And well, I was right. He's already in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
But then, you have to be lucky. And I had we had the oldest coaching staff in football, so I was surrounded by experience. I was surrounded by people that hadn't been out of coaching for 14 years. Plus, I had the opportunity for 14 years to watch other head coaches coach. I always went in early. I didn't go in the day of the game. So I went in 2 days before the game. So I watched head coaches coach because I had credibility as a coach. I was able to go into meeting rooms. I sit in offensive coordinators' rooms. I sit in with the head coach. I sat in with Don Shula, sat in with Tom Landry, sat in with Bud Grant, and you listen and learn. And, and a lot of people listen, but they don't hear anything, And I think I learned a lot. I was able to say, some of the things we were doing back when I was coaching are better than the way they're doing it in my mind. And some of the things they're doing is a lot better than the way I was doing it. So I go back into coaching and I put a lot of thoughts together. But not being able to run my own offense and call my own plays and coach my own quarterback, it gave me more time on the practice field to evaluate every player and every coach. And I could come in, I could make critical statements and critique what I saw in the practice because I saw it all. People always ask me, how did you ever discover Kurt Warner? Well, I was standing in the secondary. Well, Kurt Warner was throwing the opponent's pass offense against our first string defense 3 days a week, his first year there. And I would walk off the field and I'd say, son of a gun, this kid can play or else our defense stinks. It's probably a combination of both. But being able to watch everybody coach and watch every player, we made very, very few mistakes personnel-wise. I had a great personnel department at the Rams, and Charlie Army and John Becker, those guys. I'd bring Mike Martz in and turn the offense over to him. And now he's coming to coach guys that have had their asses worked off for 2 years. And we changed practice schedules a little bit, eased up on a little, because we'd pushed them as far as we thought we needed to push them to be great. And we're fortunate. We go to Super Bowl and win it. So I'd go home. And then Carl Peterson from the Chiefs, he had coached with me at UCLA. I brought him to the Eagles with me. Then he ran the USFL Philadelphia Stars team and won the championship 2 out of 3 years. And then he ran the Chiefs for 20 years. So I knew him like a son. So he asked me to come back and coach. I said, all right, I'll do it. And it was a good decision. I never got as far as we would like to have. My third year, we were best offense in football.
Mm-hmm.
We're 13-3, and we got beat by Peyton Manning in the playoff game. And anybody else we probably would have beaten, but we couldn't stop Peyton Manning. They couldn't stop us. To this day, it's the only playoff game played where neither team punted. So, and I stayed there 5 years and made the playoffs one time, but could never get the defense up to what it had to be to take advantage of our offense. And so far, we didn't get the Super Bowl. But it was a great experience, and I carried that same philosophy to the Chiefs that I ran with the Rams. I didn't training camp work them quite like I did the first 2 years at the Rams because I thought the program was further along. Marty Schottenheimer had been there for a number of years. Some of those guys, Marty Schottenheimer is a Hall of Fame football coach. They just haven't put him in there, okay? But so it was a little different approach, but it was a great experience. It was really a great experience, but it all centered around surrounding myself with people that I could trust, that I knew were talented, that I could help be better. And if they didn't fit, then I didn't keep them. And I released very few coaches in my career, very few coaches. I think I helped some coaches. I know they helped me. But if, Mike Martz, Al Saunders comes in, and I was very, very fortunate to have those kind of people with me. And so we win the world championship. Those guys put me in the Hall of Fame, okay? There's some coaches that aren't in there right now that are a hell of a lot better coaching Dick Vermeil, but they're not in there yet. And I'm campaigning for them to get in there, so I feel better about being in there. But it centers around surrounding yourself with good people that are willing to go to work, and then present them a team in the frame of mind to be coached. Believe this or not, football players want discipline.
Mm-hmm.
They want structure. They want to see the best player on the team get his ass chewed out. You know, there are a lot of people who only chew the guy that doesn't play. You know, they want everyone held to a high standard. And our philosophy, especially in the Chiefs, as I grew in my thinking, you don't develop a philosophy in 1, 2, 3 years, develop over years. I had 33 years in coaching football. And I just started realizing that head coach has got to give players to a coach in the frame of mind to be coached, and the frame of mind to be disciplined, and same frame of mind to be structured to do. This is what we're going to do. And you know, for the most part, it paid off. Some of my closest friends in my life are former players. I had lunch with Vince Papale, Invincible, yesterday. Okay, there were, you know, when you bring people close together, and it's tough to get close together, they stick together. And I learned that. I could tell you a story sitting in NFL locker rooms and players I'm sitting next to the day before a game, and they come over there and say, see that guy, if I was a head coach, I wouldn't let him in my locker room. He said, we don't have any discipline problems because we don't have any discipline. You know, so yeah, someone has to run the program. Someone has to set the standards. Then you surround yourself with people that can maintain those standards and even raise them. You know, and I never worked on a staff that I didn't have somebody on the staff that was a hell of a lot better coach than me.
Well, let me ask you about that. Like, what was your process of hiring people? Because I think that's like, I think,
Simple. It
I
was
think
simple.
every level, high school, college, NFL, like that's kind of a key fact of like you can try to do things by yourself, but you need a good staff around you. Kind of as you
Oh,
put.
no, that's what I'm saying. A percentage of my staff was hired because of someone that I worked with, I knew personally, told me to hire. I've hired guys in the NFL that I never interviewed. I hired one guy I'd never met. Okay, because the guy he was working with Rod Dowhauer in New York Giants, and Rod Dowhauer and I were good friends. He worked for him at UCLA. He was been a coach in college and worked for Don Coryell. And if he tells me this guy's a hell of a coach, I believe him. I hired 2 coaches one time because Bill Walsh told me to hire. Yeah. I never felt I was smart enough or whatever it may be, experienced enough maybe in the interview process to bring somebody in and talk for 6 hours and decide he's a good football coach. That doesn't tell me he's a good disciplinarian. That doesn't tell me he's a disciplined guy on the field. That doesn't mean he can demand a lot from a player. That doesn't mean he can motivate a kid and push him and chew his ass out in front of everybody else. You know, and so that's the number one way. When I took the head coaching job at UCLA, I still had a month to go coaching special teams and running backs with Los Angeles Rams for Chuck Knox. I kept 7 assistant coaches off a 10-man staff at UCLA. Smartest decision I ever made in coaching. Terry Donahue, okay, Dick Tomey, those guys, Lynn Stiles, those guys all became head coaches. Yeah, Terry Donahue's in Coaches Hall of Fame. Dick Tomey's Coaches Hall of Fame. Great football coaches. And in 2 years, we go to Ohio State and upset the number 1 team in the country. Okay, why? Because real good coaches. And I had watched these guys coach in spring practice. I had watched these guys coach. Because we would go visit the spring practices at USC and UCLA when I was at the LA Rams. And you know, and hell, I'm a month away now. I couldn't do my job as a coach for the Rams and interview coaches to get so I kept 7 of the 10 people on the staff.
Okay.
It's an amazing job that they did. Amazing job. If I hadn't done that, we wouldn't have beat Ohio State the second year. No way.
Now, with that, the other thing I want to ask you, and you mentioned it a little bit there during your first part, is yes, you are disciplinarian. Yes, you believe in hard work, but also like anything I watch of you, and then I watched your football life, and I think every player kind of said the same thing. You're hard and tough, but they talked about you in relationships and how much you meant to them.
Well, Coach, that's all built through with a process. You don't walk in and turn on a relationship. It's developed by them evaluating you and learning to trust everything you say. When you fire last year's first round pick off the field and cut him from the team, you get everybody's attention. Okay. And I had to do that at the Rams. Okay. First round pick a year before. 4th, 5th games, he's gone. So what's that tell everybody else in the locker room? Hey, we can trust this guy. If he says something, that's the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I came up as a high school football coach. I had 6 of my starters on my high school championship team at the Hall of Fame. Okay, they were there. They were in their late 70s. Okay, but they were there, and we in high school, my wife would we'd have all players come home because you didn't have meetings all day, and they'd come home watch a game filmed at our house, and she'd make them a cake or something, and we go into these other situations, and the off season we'd have them at the house for dinner, and all that kind of stuff. And I kept that same process. I'll bet you in the NFL, we have fed in our house in the off season 85% of the kids we ever coach. New draft choices, free agents we signed. Okay, it's next Thursday, all offensive linemen and wives at the house at 6:00. And my wife and I would cook. Well, we did that in high school. I just never changed. And I think it gave players the opportunity to see me as a person as well as a coach, but they saw me as a coach. They could see me get pissed off and be mad at an assistant coach or be mad at a player and make the tough decisions and see my mistakes that I made. No one's immune to making mistakes, but I think by the time a player played for me, they knew me. Okay. And I take very, very seriously the term when I hear a player say, I played for Coach Vermeil. That's a hell of a responsibility. I have a lot of guys. I don't hear them say I played for the Rams. They say I just talked to Todd Light today, my all-pro left corner today. Okay, but actually about an hour ago, and they say I played for Coach Vermeil. Well, that's a hell of a responsibility, And not that I played for the Eagles. No, here in town they say I played Coach Vermeil. I still see all those guys. I've given 4 eulogies in the last year and a half of starters off my Eagle teams. So it's that relationship occurs because it's a foundation of structure, discipline, and it develops trust. And once you have the trust, you can start building relationships. And I've never been afraid to allow a relationship to go beyond respect. You can respect the guy and not like him. You can respect the way he plays football. You can respect the way he works, but not like him. So I once while someone fall, I say, I love you, buddy. You are really, really special. It's amazing how infectious that is. Mm-hmm. It's infectious, especially when it's sincere. The first man that ever said, I love you to me was Bill Walsh. Okay. He was a graduate assistant at San Jose State when I walked on, and we became friends from that day on. We worked together at Stanford. I mean, we have shared vacations together, and he helped me when I went back in. He was part of the reason I went back in. He kept bugging me all the time about going back into coaching. And anyway, it's it's not the same kind of love you have for your own kids. You wouldn't cut your own kid. You wouldn't fire your own wife. But respect can mean a lot of things. But the term, I can't come up with a better term than love. I love it. And I promise you, some people that you have coached or worked with that fit into that category. Yep. Yeah. And, it's amazing. I get very few, I'm not bragging when I say this, because my wife pointed it out about a week ago. I hang up the phone. I said, I love you. She said, Dick, why did you always say I love you to this guy? I said, because he just said that to me and hanging up. It's reciprocal. And that's how the relationships get very, very, very deep, very deep. And they last forever.
Yep. That was perfect, Coach. And I mean, I also want to ask you about how do you because you went from high school to college and the NFL to the UCLA head coaching job to the Eagles to broadcasting to the Rams, then some more broadcasting, and actually no, wait, yep, and then the Chiefs, and then some on and off broadcasting and other things after that. How did you kind of evolve as a coach and a person over the course of that time? Because again, obviously football changes and develops and rules adjust, and that's great. But as a coach and how you viewed things, and as a person and how you dealt with players, how did you evolve over that 50+ year span?
Well, I think, experience is great, but it only helps you after you needed it. Remember that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And I had, starting out, 1959, I was assistant coach at Del Mar High School. The next year, I was a head coach at Hillsdale High School. The next year I was an assistant in junior college. The next year I was a head coach in junior college. The next year I was a freshman coach at Stanford. The next year I was coaching the offense at Stanford. 3 or 4 years later, I'm the first special teams coach. I think if you go to work and work hard unselfishly, you work hard just to help everybody get better for their reasons, not for your reasons. They sense that. They sense that, and the word gets out. You know, as a high school and junior college coach, I went to every clinic on the West Coast. I transcribed and made notes out of every lecture. And I got so people I had Eric Persigian call me at Notre Dame. Were you at John McKay's football clinic? I said, did you take notes? He said, yeah. I said, well, you send it to me, I'll send you $50. $50 in those days was a lot of money, you know, and I did. I did a lot of that kind of stuff, not because I was using it to get a better job. That when you listen to them, you write it down, and then you put it out and organize it, you start understanding it better. It starts giving you a better picture of the game. But really, I learned a lot from the people I was around. You know, the different assistant coaches. You know, I worked with Jim Mora. Jim Mora was a great football coach, ex-Marine. You know, John Ralston. John Ralston taught me the meaning of bringing the organization together from the top down, not here up. Get up there, get the president of Stanford University to believe winning's important at Stanford. You know what happened? They won 2 Rose Bowls in a row. Okay. It didn't come close until the president also wanted to win. And the admissions director also wanted to win. And, you know, John Ralston was great at that. And he was great at hiring coaches. You know, he hired Jim Mora, he hired Bill Walsh, he hired me in that category. He had Rod Russ, another NFL head football coach. I mean, he was a marvelous, and he had a great way of recognizing talent and then recruiting them, getting them, you know. I worked for Tommy Prothro. Tommy Prothro was the best fundamental teacher of the game. And the old-fashioned way, the Crowther sleds, all these different things. And he was really a general. He was General MacArthur, General Eisenhower. In his day on the college football field, when he walked by a drill, the whole tempo of the drill changed. And I would get nervous because he'd be jump my ass too. And but by the time I worked for him as his offensive coordinator in 1970, he was no longer in the X's and O, but he controlled the practice schedule. He made it up. He told you what you were coaching fundamentally. He corrected you. He had the discipline, the structure, the deep respect of all the people above him. I go to work for George Allen. Okay, geez, you talk about fanatic detail and preparation. You know, you know, he would ask you to do things, and you walk away, thought he was kidding you. No, but he was. He was serious. I'll give you an example. We're coming down the elevator in Chicago, going to play the Bears. 1969. I'm coaching the special teams. He looks at me, he says, did you check the angle of the sun at kickoff time? I said, geez, coach, no, I didn't. I didn't think of that. He says, well, you know, your kickoff returner is going to be fielding the ball into the sun. So, geez, you know, that I figured out that's why all the other assistants, the 6 other guys, stayed away from him, because he'd ask them questions he knew they couldn't answer. But he sent me. We opened with the Baltimore Colts, world champions, in Baltimore, the opening game, 1969. Okay. I left training camp 4 of the 6 weekends of preseason games and went and watched the Colts play personally, to watch Mackey, the all-pro Hall of Fame tight end, play and grade him and all that, because George Allen felt that they could detect run or pass by how he lined up and how he moved on. So help me God. Okay, I did it. I'd get on a plane, I'd get home just in time for the preseason game. So I write up my report. I put it on the desk. Here, Coach Allen, here's my report. There is nothing we can play. You know what he said? That's great, Coach. The conclusion is there's no conclusion. Good job. Oh, but you know, I learned that from him. And the other thing, he had a way of always talking about family. We are a family. You know, maybe, you know, I didn't adopt you. You weren't born in my family, but you know, we work hard, we stick together. By the time we play, we'll be a family. He used to say, you know, they took 18-year-old kids and put them on Guadalcanal, and they became a family in 6 weeks. If they can do it, we can do it. You know, and he was a big Well, just a guy that sold those little things, and he ran his own defense. He ran it himself. We only had a 6-man coaching staff. Then I joined it. I was seventh, first special teams coach. With Chuck Knox, great leader. Great leader. Boy, when he spoke in a meeting room, you could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop. And when he just had that Irish fighting eyes about him, and he's a fundamental guy and tough. He really put some polishing on my edges, really. And I worked for another guy named Frank Gans. Frank was the finest special teams coach, probably the finest coach in every category I ever worked with. He coached my special teams at the Rams. And he was absolutely, his meetings, I took John Madden into this Saturday meeting before we played Minnesota in the first playoff game in 1990, going to the Super Bowl. John Madden came out of that meeting. He says, Coach, I've been in football all my life. That's the finest meeting I've ever been in. He said, can I come back if you win the game and put a camera in there? I said, no way. He would not go back. But so I've been around guys that really, really influenced me. And I have never been afraid of saying that guy knows a hell of a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah.
You know, and when I became a head coach at UCLA, because of my exposure to all these pro coaches and assistant coaches, I felt I could coach any position on my football team adequately, and a few of them maybe even superiorly. I don't know if I could have, but I had that kind of confidence because I watched great coaches do it, and that really gave me confidence. And I didn't have quite as much confidence when I went back after being out 14 years. In fact, the first year was really tough because I couldn't be how I used to be. I missed that 14 years of being hands-on and everything. And I'm not calling my own plays and making the final decisions on the red zone and sometimes in that atmosphere you can feel a little bit left out. But I learned to handle it. And direct my leadership in a way to help them do a better job, and made sure those players they were asking to do it would do it at the best of their ability consistently. And that, it paid off for me. And I feel very grateful for everybody that produced me. It was, it's amazing how much I've learned from so many different people. But at the end, you got to be who you are. Yeah, I tell Bill Parcells, when I came back into coaching, he was one of my leading helpers to get me going again. And I've told Bill, I wish I had a little more of you and me. There were times I know I should have been tougher. Because Bill would have been, and I didn't. I did it my way. But I always wish I had a little more of Bill in me. Tom Coughlin might be the finest coach I ever watched coach on a field as a head coach when he was at Boston College. Yeah, I mean, he was amazing. Just amazing football coach when he got out of kids, and he proved that when he went to pros. So, there are certain personnel. Bill Snyder, Kansas State. Bill Snyder, my gosh, was he a great football coach? Maybe one of the finest ever coached college football. Just look at his record and in the situation he was in, So I don't know. But, I was smart enough that when I hired 2 Woody Hayes coaches, I had 2 coaches in my staff that played for Woody. One coached for Woody Hayes and one played for him. I hired them both. They were on my defensive staff. And because Woody Hayes was an old-time tough guy, disciplined structure, run the ball, all that kind of stuff. But when we played them in the Rose Bowl, I hired their defensive line coach. I couldn't get their linebackers coach come right away, but I got him later. Okay. I got him later to come and then you find out why Ohio State was so good. Because they had great coaches as well as good players. So I don't know. I've always believed in, and number one, the players have to know you care. Yeah. You better be a good example. The team will not be what you are not. Okay. You got to build an environment in which they enjoy working in, no matter how tough it is. You got to have a defined plan that defines the structure and what you do and what to believe in and what to trust. And then you got to build relationships, and you got to be sincere. Your work ethic program, like I've already talked about, they've, a lot of people now in the NFL have no clue what it is to work like they used to work. And I'll tell you, the teams that have brought back a little of it, Detroit Lions, believe me, they don't work like they work more old fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's safer and better for the player of today. Fewer head injuries and injuries like that. But now they shit. Now you watch an NFL team. I'm not negative. It's a better game. It's faster. More things happen. It's exciting. Talent's better. But they play the game standing up. Yeah, you don't chop block anymore. You can't cut in the open field. You know, you can't do this, do it. All these kind of things. Well, when I was still coaching, none of those rules were in. I just talked to Willie Roaf's wife this morning, and they have a documentary coming out on Willie. And we were talking about it, you know, and when he pulled out as an offensive tackle on a big cut play, we called it truck. Yeah, when he hit you, it was forever. You know, people avoided him rather than trying to make the tackle. They avoid him, you know. So, but the game is played differently today, and it's safer that way. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned time there, and it's something I kind of want to ask you is because everywhere you went, you were kind of given time to build something, to put to write the train, wherever you want it, write the ship, wherever you want to call it. And I think not just in the NFL, but all levels, coaches don't get enough time anymore.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
What's your kind of view on that? Because like again, there's a lot of rule changes and time you get players at all levels and all that jazz. But like I just
in
don't
the NFL, that's a players' union.
Yeah.
See, that was a move made in the players' union to get the contract signed, the collective bargaining agreement signed. You know something? Most players that you really coach who want to get better want to stay after practice and work more. They want to work longer. They want the line coach to work. You watch offensive line play in the NFL today, some of the fundamentals are terrible. They're embarrassing. But because they're not given the time. They spend more time on the scheme and the plays and the design than the individual player. That's why that you can't make a mistake in the draft. You can't make a mistake in free agent. You aren't going to make it because you don't have enough time to develop your guys like they used to. Now, Eagles do a great job. They got 25 coaches, so they can break a practice down with more coaches and get a lot of individual work in less time because it's fewer people in each group. Anyway.
Now with that, like I also want to ask you because you again, like I said, coached a long time and you coached a lot of good players. Like I mean,
Never win without good players. Okay.
I mean, like a third of the Hall of Fame, you've probably coached in some aspect or another. Probably, it's probably I don't know if that's exact stat, but like I was even just looking at your quarterbacks, like Ron Jaworski, Trent Green, Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk was on your team, Terry Holt. Like I mean, again, that's just scratching the surface of talent you touched. Do you have any like players that like you look back on, you're like they don't get enough recognition that you coach that you're just like he was a hell of a football player, and I enjoy.
Well, yeah, I do. Yeah, that Priest Holmes, running back. If he'd been in the New York Giants or the Chicago Bears, and he broke the NFL touchdown record with 27 touchdowns in one season. He had over 2 years in a row. He had over 20. You know, Priest Holmes is unbelievable. He was a college free agent to Baltimore. We signed him as a free agent when he left Baltimore, and now he had a great offensive line in front of him, maybe one of the best ever. But he, you know, today he might be a Hall of Famer. When you start, you know, no, I don't think any running back got close to 20 touchdowns. You know, but Trent Green. You mentioned three quarterbacks. I take great pride in saying this. Jaworski was a second-round pick out of Youngstown State. Okay, he went to the Rams. I was there when we drafted him. I traded an all-pro tight end for him and brought him with me. Why? Because I thought he'd fit. I thought he was coachable. He had a strong arm. All he needed was time. Kurt Warner is his fairy book tale. Okay. Trent Green was in the league 6 or 7 years before he played in the game. We signed him as a free agent, and he ended up in the Pro Bowl. You have to stay on the field long enough to develop your quarterback. And, you know, it's all about reps and repetition and teaching. And the shorter practices cuts down the amount of time the quarterback is. And the quarterback needs 21 other players on the field a lot to really be taught to position and react and pressure, handle the blitz packages, handle the red zone packages. And you cut down on time, you cut down on the development of the quarterback. I never coached a football team, and I'm bragging when I say I never coached a football team. The quarterback wasn't all league in high school, junior college, All-American at UCLA, and 3 All-Pros in pro football. We stayed on the field because they need to work more than anybody else on the field, and they can't work alone. And it can't be 7-on-7 versus air. So that's not a secret. It's not. There are a lot of people did a hell of a lot better, but I'm proud of what we did. But I say to Carol once in a while, if I wasn't 88 years old, I'd go back and do it again. They're complicated, but I don't think I could do it in the 2-hour practice sessions.
Yeah, that has kind of limited some things. And again, you see why you mentioned offensive line technique, or just time to just like see everything too. Just as you mentioned, like coverages, blitzes, like you can't practice everything in that short amount of time. I have two last questions for you. The first one, I want to approach this as somebody who's been a high school head coach, and then again, I have a lot of high school and college coaches who watch this or listen to this, depending on the platform. Like, what lessons learned over the course of your career could you pass along to a young first time head coach, um, that maybe has taken a job this year or recently taken one when they hear this podcast? Like, what recommendations, lessons could you pass on? Because again, I think you kind of mentioned it like it doesn't matter if you where you hear something not unless you listen. And I think that's like anytime you have somebody with experience who had success, I think it's wise to listen to them and what they did and how they did it, and maybe there's something you can take from it. Is there anything you can pass along to a lot of first time coaches?
Well, the number one thing I always say is make sure you be yourself. A lot of head coaches have turned out great assistants they tried to be who the head coach was rather than who they are. And don't be embarrassed to let them know who you really are as a person. Yeah. I said this a long time ago, that I didn't coach football. I coach people that play football. Yeah. And you've got to put those guys first and then put them in the position they're going to play. And they're all a little bit different, but I think I like demanding people. I like compassionate people. You can be demanding and passionate. Well, and compassionate, but you got to be careful of being too nice all the time, because it's just your job is not to make them happy. Your job is to make them better.
Yep.
And I've learned that sitting in NFL locker rooms talking to NFL players. I know they respect discipline. They respect structure. And they don't respect the guy that's there because he was a first round pick that doesn't work and gets paid all the money. They hold it. It's a grudge. They know he's a good player and all that, but he's not a guy they bring home to dinner. Okay. But, I said this to Bobby Knight one time. I said, Bobby, winning isn't complicated. People complicated. And he used to tease me on that once in a while, and because we became friends, we trout fished in Oregon, Montana, but together, and but he took it to the extreme. I couldn't be Bobby Knight. First, I'm not smart enough to be Bobby Knight, and I'm not strong enough to be Bobby Knight. But his demanding structure for excellence was unbelievable, and you had to meet that standard. And a lot of kids. A lot of kids don't have that in them anymore. I just finished reading the best book I've ever read, called Masters of the Air. It's about the B-17 pilots flying out of England over in Germany during the Second World War. And there's stories in there about what teamwork's all about that are unbelievable, they're almost unbelievable. And I think most coaches ought to read it, because the tough things, the most dangerous things they went through brought them closer and closer and closer together. Yeah. And those that couldn't handle it, they got out. They go nervous breakdown and fly home. But those that were there, you picked up the book and read it. I promise you'll call me and say, unbelievable, coach. But anyway.
No, perfect.
You send me your email address, and I have a lot of things I believe in written down.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. I don't have any secrets, but I'll send it to you.
Yep. No, I'll email you right after we get done with this, Coach. And then the the last thing I want to ask you is, and I don't know really how to word this, but like, I think as all of us coach, we reflect. Is there anything else that you would like, just whether it be a football, because that question is more directed towards coaches, whether it be a football fan, whether it be your players, whether it be anybody, like when you reflect on things, like what, I don't even know how to word this, like your view on your career. And I know you've talked about before how you don't necessarily like boast about necessarily what you did. You more focus on the relationships. But when you look back, is there anything, well, I'll word it this way. Are you the most proud of over the time of your time coaching? Because I'm gonna assume it's not
Oh,
this.
yeah. I'm most proud of relationships I developed as a head coach and a leader. Yeah. All right, dear. Yeah, but really, coach, in my losing seasons, I had a lot of them in rebuilding. In those rebuilding years is where we built the relationships.
Mhm.
Everybody's happy when you're winning.
Yes.
My first year at the Rams, we lost 8 in a row. That's hard to do. You almost have to throw games to lose 8 in a row, but we did it. But 9 guys off that original roster went to the Super Bowl 3 years later. There were only 9 guys left on the entire roster under contract with the Rams. 9 players that they had on contract when we took over in 97 went to the Super Bowl in 99. 9 guys. But I'll tell you something, they could play and they could sell the concepts. And they were unbelievable examples for any new player, first rounder, second rounder, third round, all pro. I just listened to Marshall Faulk. I was with Marshall 3 weeks ago in St. Louis. They honored the 25th anniversary of the Super Bowl team. And he spoke, he was spectacular. You know what he talked about? He said, we get all the credit with our great offense, but the defense won the last 2 games of the year. That's Marshall Faulk. That's Marshall Faulk, okay? And he's probably the most gifted athlete I've ever been around. Yeah. He could have played corner, wide receiver. He didn't just line him up and play.
Yeah. And now he's following you into coaching, coach. So
Yeah, he's good coach running back in Colorado. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
coaches, that's our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. We appreciate Coach Vermeil for coming on. Like, share, subscribe so other coaches can find this conversation with Coach Vermeil. Check out our sponsor. Otherwise, that is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.